President Trump will tour the Texas border today with Governor Greg Abbott. This comes as the governor pledges to finish building the wall in a push against the Biden administration and the Democrats. Joining me right now is former Bush senior advisor and Fox News contributor Karl Rove. Also joining the conversation all morning long this morning, Dagan McDowell and Brian Brenberg. Great to see everybody this morning. Karl, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Your reaction to the ongoing border crisis and what President Trump's trip today may do.
Well, it'll certainly draw attention to the border, but we also had attention drawn to the border last week by the visit of Vice President Kamala Harris to El Paso, about 600 miles, more than 600 miles away from the lower Rio Grande Valley, which is where we've been seeing all these scenes for months of illegals coming across the border in a very open fashion. I thought it was an extraordinary visit by the Vice President. It came 3 months after she was appointed to be in charge of border security. She spent 4 hours on the ground. It took her longer to fly to Central America and back than she spent in El Paso. She gave remarks that lasted 555 words and never mentioned border security. The closest she got to it was saying that the administration hoped to have immigration happen in an orderly fashion. Just amazing to me. Didn't go to a facility that was housing unaccompanied minors, didn't view the wall. It just is amazing. And today we're going to see the governor, the former president, the chairman of the Senate, State Senate committee that has to oversee these issues, all visiting the real hot spot on the border, which, as I say, is over 600 air miles to the southwest of El Paso, which is where Kamala Harris went.
Yeah, I mean, you say it was extraordinary. What was extraordinary is the fact that she actually did not go to the border. She was at the airport and she didn't view all of those very important things that you just listed, like the migrant facilities. And we've got an enormous amount of illicit narcotics coming into this country through the border every day. We've got 5,000 people a day being delivered from the Mexican cartels. I just find it extraordinary that it's the criminal cartels deciding who gets into America and who doesn't. They're making $400 million a month. We took the show to the border a month ago, and we were outraged by what was taking place. And I've been to El Paso. I went to El Paso in 2019, but in 2021, I went to McAllen, and it is a different story in McAllen. Wide open borders, 5,000 people a day coming to Texas.
Yeah, in fairness, she did go to the border. She went to the Paseo del Norte port of entry to look at technology. But you're absolutely right. She did nothing that talked about border security. Yeah, never mentioned traffickers, never mentioned the cartel. She focused on, I'm going to, we're going to get at the root cause of migration, which is the conditions in Central America. It is hubris to believe that in a matter of a couple of years, you can dramatically change those countries. And not only that, but it is political stupidity not to understand that the beginning of immigration reform starts with securing the border. And as I say, never mentioned the word secure, never mentioned the words border security, never met with agents to talk about interdiction of illegals, and again didn't go to where it's happening. Where it's happening is about 1,100 miles by road and 600 miles by air if you fly across northern Mexico in the lower Rio Grande Valley, and she couldn't be bothered. It was really an extraordinary moment.
It was, and just to be clear for our viewers, a port of entry is very different than an open border. Port of entry is used for people to come in legally. The open borders is where they're coming in illegally, and that's the point. So to say I went to the border, well, she didn't go to the border. She went to a port of entry. No. Dagan McDowell, jump in here.
Karl, how much is this issue going to benefit Republicans and hurt the Democrats in the midterms? We've got a long way to go, but the burden on Biden and company is the fact that they basically broke something that was fixed and created this crisis. So how much of a liability will it be in the midterms?
Well, I think it's going to be a pretty substantial liability. It won't be the issue in the campaign. I mean, the economy and taxes and spending and deficits and all the goofy proposals that we've got to grow the federal government, that's going to be a bigger issue. But the border security and immigration is going to be an issue, and it's an issue on which the Democrats do very, very badly, and I think they're only going to do worse. I mean, we're now about ready to get a decision by the administration to do away with what are called Title 42. rejections. That's where people come across the border and we return them to Mexico citing pandemic conditions. Think about this. We're approaching 50% of Americans having a vaccination. Mexico is 1/3 of that. And the Central American countries from which we're getting a lot of the illegals coming have, in most instances, far less than 1% of their people have been vaccinated. And in Nicaragua, they don't even keep statistics. It's so bad. So now we're about ready to be put in a place where we suddenly accept people who are not going to be tested, who are not going to be quarantined, who are going to be processed and released into the United States to make their way God knows where. And it's going to have an immediate impact on the health situation along the border. Those hospitals and hospital districts along the border are already under a lot of pressure in the lower Rio Grande Valley. This is only going to make it worse.
I just want to add one thing, Carl, real quick. Mexico has the second highest observed case fatality ratio in terms of COVID deaths. But we want to get rid of Title 42 and open our borders to basically infections. I mean, I guess that's the left-wing argument, is like we're a benevolent society, so we need to take care of people who are not U.S. residents or citizens.
Remember earlier, before these Title 42 rules were put in place, we literally had the cities of Brownsville and Harlingen and others along the border the cities having to pay to test people before they could get on the buses, because the bus company said, we will not accept people who've not been tested, who haven't had a rapid test, because you're putting our other passengers and our drivers at risk when people get on these buses in the valley and ride to Dallas or Houston or Corpus Christi or elsewhere in the country. So we're about ready to have that all happen again. And who's going to pay for this? The federal government is failing along the border, and Texas is already, I think the total is, we're spending $1 billion a year on border security measures out of the budget of the state of Texas, money that would otherwise go to schools and health care and so forth for Texans. Instead, we're having to step up and do what the federal government is failing to do, because Texans are being affected by these open borders. Ranchers, communities, farmers, families, you name it, they're being affected adversely by this.
And Carl, it's not just Texas, because these narcotics make their way into the interior of our country in 2 days' time. And by the way, this whole conversation, we're talking about those people who have been apprehended, right? 180,000 people apprehended in the month of May alone. What about the gotaways, Carl? Okay, you have tens of thousands of gotaways that are on surveillance cameras. They came into the country, they got away, they went into the interior of the country. We don't know who they are, we don't know where they went, we don't know what their intentions are. And then you question why we're seeing spikes in crime. Look, if they had good intentions, they would want to be apprehended. They didn't want to be apprehended. And there were about 40 to 50,000 gotaways in May alone. There's been about 300,000 gotaways just in the last couple of months. Carl, and now you hear the Democrats trying to blame the spike in crime on Republicans. I got to get your take on this, okay? How long were we talking about the goofy policy of defund the police and its potential effect? Now we're seeing the effect, and they're trying to say, oh, no, it wasn't us.
I thought Cedric Richmond's comments on Sunday on Fox News Sunday, blaming the Republicans and launching a deeply personal attack at Lindsey Graham, saying he doesn't have a clue about what crime, was one of the most astonishing performances I've seen out of a White House staffer in a long, long time. First of all, you're absolutely right. Think about this. 99% of the cost of local law enforcement and corrections is paid for out of state and local funds. Less than 1% comes from the federal government. And Richmond's theory was, since no Republican voted for the rescue plan, which is giving an unknown amount of money to local law enforcement. Remember what kind of money they get. Local governments can pay up to $13 an hour for, quote, essential workers, but you got to designate the police as essential workers. And second of all, you can use pandemic money for services that have been adversely affected by the pandemic or revenue losses. We don't know today, and Cedric Richmond in the White House cannot tell you within any accuracy how much money is going out of the COVID relief fund to law enforcement. But the people who are cutting the funds for law enforcement are Democratic mayors and Democratic city councils. There's not a single Republican mayor of a major city in America who has cut their law enforcement budget. The largest city in America with a Republican mayor is in Fort Worth. And they haven't cut the budget.
It's another elitist who thinks the American people are stupid. We're not. Karl Rove, thank you. We'll be right back.
Absolutely right.